Today I'm building this entire city from scratch, one step at a time, so you can use the same approach in your own cities. The challenge this time is making Australian-style inner-city terraces transition naturally into French-style suburban housing without the whole thing feeling confused. The map, save file, mod list and visual settings are all linked down below. Let's dive in. Alright, so we'll utilize the beautiful Vivid Cities 4K map theme, and as we start zooming into the starting tiles of Willshire, we're going to map out the heart of downtown as the first thing we'll do. So I'm just going to remove this stretch of National Road, and then we'll have two one-way parallel roads defining the heart of the city. We're gonna disable all snapping for perfect alignment, then we're going to increase the parallel mode width to 4 and enable ground and constant slope modes. And then we're just gonna drag out this segment to allow us for an easy tie-in with the National Road and the bridge crossing. We'll upgrade a stretch of the 2-lane National Road to 4 lanes just for a bit of lane math adherence, and then we're gonna use the 1-lane one-way highway segments to tie in the parallel main street to this connection, while also enabling the downtown traffic to make a U-turn. So we're aiming for a 90-degree angle with the continuous tool. On the other end of town, we're going to rebuild parts of the National Road and make it swing right. Then we'll once again utilize the 1-lane one-way highway segments to tie it into Main Street, and allow for the same U-turn. The final thing we need before we can start mapping out much of Willshire's road layout is a bypass, to specifically allow all this dummy traffic to move around Main Street and downtown if they have no business here. So to do that, we're going to add a National Road extension allowing all this traffic to move alongside this riverfront before merging into the National Road again. We're gonna keep the northern connection super simple and just make sure that you've got full access in all directions, and then for the southern connection, this tie-in, things are gonna get a little more complex, but I think it's gonna be worthwhile. The first connection is gonna be the easy part. But as we don't want to slow down traffic, the second connection can't be an at-grade connection. So we're gonna have to kind of dig down, move underneath this 1-lane segment and connect up in this tight space. It's gonna be fun. We'll need to just elevate this 1-lane segment and then utilize the Move It mod for a final configuration. It required a bit of tweaking, but nothing too bad, and these final configurations with manipulation mode is really just to make it look a little nicer. And it does seem to already be the preferred route for traffic, which would make a lot of sense. There really isn't much to see in Willshire just yet. But that is gonna change real soon, as we're now ready to map out the road layout. I like a bit of extra character added to my cities, and being a bit of a nerd, we're going to name this Main Street North, and then the southern portion is going to be Main Street South. Now there's going to be 2 direct crossings alongside this stretch, besides the actual U-turns on either end, and these are going to be 2-lane one-way segments. So we can just quickly map those out, because that is going to provide even more of a framework to fill in the rest of the grid. A big decision will be how deep we decide for the downtown blocks to be. If we go too big, we risk a lot of empty space nestled in between some of the smaller developments, and obviously if we go too small, we don't have any room for some of the 6-tile deep developments that add a bit of a skyline and the indication that this is actually the densest part of the city. So what I think we'll do is we're gonna bring this back by about 2 tiles, and then as I bring this across, you should be able to see that we'll have an 8-tile deep block here in downtown. I'm gonna add a few of these, and I'm just gonna start by using the regular 2-lane road, and then I'll be upgrading to some more specialized roads for some added flair. to make the road layout a little more interesting while still making sure that it's fairly easy to develop, we're going to run a separate grid at a bit of an off angle compared to the first one. So if we branch out at around 25%, we can have a separate grid here, and it's just gonna make everything look a little more interesting. And this will also mark the northern boundaries of downtown, where density is going to sharply start lowering. As the wind direction seems to point south-southwest, the waterfront here is pretty ideal for some industrial development. So we're gonna add an additional ring road that kind of signalizes the change from downtown to the industry we'll have down here. There's a bit of a hillside, so we're gonna make sure we make roads a little more swoopy here, just to kind of avoid completely ignoring it. We've got a few too many direct connections to the bypass, which is inevitably going to slow down traffic here, so we're gonna clean that up a little bit by disconnecting some of these. So we can remove this one, and we can remove this one as well, potentially creating a quick ramp here instead. With the addition of this small cozy roundabout at this rather complex crossing, we now have the initial road layout all mapped up. And the final step is going to be upgrading some of these basic vanilla roads to something with just a little more flavor, such as this Suburban 2-lane road, which is basically just a regular vanilla road without any markings. A very small thing, but it adds a ton of character. I'll squeeze in a 2-lane road with some angled parking as well, and add in a few of these 1-lane roads with parking. So as I became the mayor of Willshire on a platform of education, we're gonna start with the first elementary school. And it's not gonna be a cookie cutter building, it's going to be the German themed one, because this can act as a real focal point. So I'm gonna see if I can just about squeeze it into this block here. We're doing a few road adjustments just to make room for the asset, but that's only a good thing. We'll drag out this curve here just to align to the contours of the building. And I think that's a winner. As I also campaigned on free plastic surgery for the masses, we're going to add the USA Northeast Medical Clinic. And I would like this to be placed in relatively close proximity to the bypass. I think that would be a nice thing for the ambulance drivers getting on and off, just to serve the entire region and not just the city. So I think with this in place, we might just make one additional connection. I also promised I would be super tough on crime, so naturally we need a police station. And we're going for the German themed one, which I'm going to place right here, sort of in the middle of the recreational space. My thinking being that this asset can also kind of double as a city hall. And for such a prominent structure, I think this location makes sense. It also adds a bit of nice symmetry. We're gonna make sure to add the office extension upgrade for all the paper pushers working documents. I guess they need a bit of natural light as well. I promised more funding to pick up dead people, and while I think I'm a pretty great guy, I gotta admit I didn't personally build this 12th century church on this hill, but it is gonna look all nice when it's connected up. I told my voters I'd fight fire with fire, but seeing as that's not very practical, we're just gonna build an Eastern European themed fire station in close proximity to the expressway. I can hardly take credit for the city having electricity or running water and sewage treatment. But as I place this $200,000 waste collection center right after having built a rather expensive park for the non-existent children of the city, I'm instantly reminded that above all, I campaigned on a base of healthy finances. Oh boy. Yeah, needless to say, I think it's due time we move a bunch of citizens and businesses into Willshire. Now, I would normally start a city by adding buildings to its downtown, but seeing as I'm so excited about utilizing the Australian terrace houses by Trist, I think I'm going to start with Northville. This is very much still going to be a dense inner city area, but it's going to be much more dominated by these residential terrace houses than all the commercial stuff we'll see in downtown. So to locate these, I'll open up Find It, filter for buildings, residential, and I can further specify the Australasia pack, which is really cool. I'm gonna set the width to 1 because they're practically row homes. They range from 1x2 to 1x5, which gives us plenty of flexibility. And as I start plopping out some of these, you'll notice that I'm gonna leave a few empty spaces for a few minor commercial lots just to kind of tie it into the downtown core. And I'm gonna leave a few tiles empty for some back alleys as well. So I mixed in a few medium density apartment buildings as well as a few shops and eateries, and I overall really like the look. It does look a little barren though, but that is all fixable with a bunch of street side trees and some trees added to some of the gardens here. I am also going to be removing the majority of crosswalks, at least all the ones being spawned by these back alleys. Wrapping it up with a quick roundabout and some super cheeky palm trees I added into the mix. I guess I couldn't help myself. Anyways, I am super happy with how Northville turned out, and I'm happy I chose to start with this district as well, as I imagine the transition into downtown is going to be much easier now. But seeing as downtown is going to be a mixed district with a population density that might even surpass that of Northville, I might have to focus on a bit more job creation before we map all that out, because currently we're sitting at 44% unemployment, which can't be amazing for our tax revenue. And I know it's a custom build, but I am trying to adhere to demand and job needs somewhat. What we need is a super simple job cluster located somewhere outside of the inner city. And we've already got a few roads we utilized to map out the transformer station and the waste collection center. So if we just encroach a little bit on this piece of farmland, we should have plenty of zonable space for some new jobs. We'll add just a little bit of surface parking. A modern office building, which could be the regional headquarters of a major firm, a livestock processing facility, and a Raising Cane's chicken fingers. For the remaining lots, I think a clever mixture of industrial, office and commercial zoning might just provide the diversity we need. So the district of Burfield was super easy to build, looks alright especially from afar, but most importantly added some vital employment opportunities. Alright, so I've got a couple of ideas on how I want to develop downtown. The first one being that I want the majority of the medium density commercial, mixed use and residential assets to face either Main Street North or Main Street South. And ideally, I don't want any of the buildings to have too big of a footprint, since we are trying to mix in the Australian themed terrace houses, and they're just one tile wide. There's going to be scaling issues if I try to cram in like 6x6 buildings here. In terms of the actual theme and architecture, I'm gonna be pretty flexible though. I think I'm gonna avoid distinctively European assets, but otherwise, anything goes really. I think I can utilize things from a bunch of different region packs and even some vanilla assets. Personally, I like to start by placing the biggest assets I'll have in my downtown. I think that's a very practical approach, and since the biggest assets help define the skyline and also the overall scale of downtown, it just kind of works out. So in this case, we're going to increase the lot width to 3 and we're going to filter for some medium density buildings. Additionally, I like to start by placing mixed-use buildings because they combine residential with commercial, so I want to make sure I exhaust the options I have available here. And if I'm to be even more specific, I'm gonna start with some corner lots because generally speaking we have fewer of these available, so once again I wanna use those we have. Alright, so I know that we're still missing a few basic services like road and park maintenance facilities, but even with that in mind, I'm pretty stoked that we're now in the positive as far as our budget go. But then again, downtown turned out to be much more dense than I initially planned for. We're sitting at nearly 1700 people, and we haven't even filled in the remaining gaps with the Australian themed terraced housing. We've also got more than 700 jobs down here, and while it's not really enough to satisfy the current demand for employment options, it's pretty good. Visually, we've used architecture from all over the place, but I think it all ties together pretty nicely. And most importantly, I think we've achieved the goal of having the majority of the density run alongside Main Street North and South, which has created this really interesting visual corridor. Now, we're not quite ready for all the terrace housing yet, we've just got a few additional steps to take. So the first one is going to be the addition of a few more signature buildings, because we have so many great options to choose from, and I especially want to fill out some of the remaining corner lots. I usually browse my signature buildings by just using the dedicated signature buildings menu, but I think moving forward I'm gonna use Find It a little more, because we can actually specify that we're only looking for signature buildings, and this is of course going to give us a host of other options, such as specifying the zoning size, as well as whether you want corner buildings or not. So getting some extra uniqueness and character added for all these signature buildings, we're gonna start with the Hellenic Greek restaurant. And this corner here between Main Street South and Goldenrod Street is perfect. And just look at this asset. This is another one from PDX Mods, and I even think it's from the same author of the Australian terrace housing. We're adding this wonderful South Asian grocer and halal butcher to Kent Street. And then on the corner of Kent and Goldenrod, we're adding the Lord Nuri Australian pub. We've got some really cool narrow options as well, so I'm going to add the Balta Pines too, somewhere here alongside Oak Avenue. Now, my idea behind the medium density stuff here is that due to the proximity of the beach, this is a pretty desirable area where you'd see just a bit more demand. This wonderful espresso bar is technically a corner lot due to having some outdoor seating, so we'll get that added to, what would that be, Kent and Maryvale. We'll get a fish and chip shop added to this corner of Oak Avenue and Eastgate. And if you're not a fish person, you can walk a few steps down the block and grab a bagel instead. On the north end of downtown, we've got a specialized banh mi bakery, as well as the Supper Inn restaurant. And while downtown Willshire is a fairly dense, lively place, it's not gonna completely escape the wrath of surface parking. We're not gonna add any massive sprawling parking lots, mainly just 2x4, 2x2, 2x3, 2x5. These are some really simple assets I grabbed off of PDX Mods, but they just give you a ton of flexibility in just getting a bit of parking in, without having to constantly reuse the vanilla ones. We can imagine an old parking lot or even an empty lot being converted into a bicycle storage facility, but generally speaking, bikes aren't really prioritized here in Willshire. So as unemployment is still hovering around 17%, I think it would be unwise to add a ton of additional housing at this point in time. Instead, we're going to buy the next parcel of land to the immediate west of the city. I think we might call this West Willshire. Yeah, very creative. And then we're going to provide a high school for the city. Because while I think a college or a university is probably outside the scope of this build, we have a lot of eligible teenagers ready to attend a high school. We just need to build one. Obviously, we're gonna have to expand our road system a little bit just to be able to accommodate this. So we're just gonna bring the national road down to about here, maybe just making an additional segment run north for future expansions. And then we're just going to organically expand on the existing angled grid here from Northville. And hopefully this is going to tie the city much better together with this West Willshire expansion, because it's not going to look as fragmented, especially if we make sure to upgrade this stretch of the highway to just a regular street. Now, we don't want too many actual intersections to slow down traffic here alongside what is now called Sheffield Street, because I imagine it's gonna get pretty busy in the future. So what we've done here is we've restricted any left turns and going straight through so that we have continuous traffic. With a bit of extra flexibility, you can of course get onto Sheffield Street. And I think we're gonna do the same thing here with this little suburban road. So we'll disable this left turn. We'll disable this left turn, and now we have continuous traffic once more. We've got plenty of awesome high school options, but seeing as I'd like to combine old architecture with the ability to add some sort of a sports complex, I think this is the perfect fit. I'm gonna try to kind of align it to the bends in the national road in front of it, give it a bit of space on either side, sort of like this. And then we'll need a road with just a bit of parking so that we can get the sports complex added as an immediate upgrade. I'm gonna align the sports field so that it touches with Aspen Street, and then just realign a few of the roads here. So Willshire High School is now open for business with enrollment nearing 350. Which is really nice, and it's hopefully going to have a positive effect on some of our demand, especially for offices. Now we're going to utilize some of the empty space to the north of the high school to fill in a few additional service requirements. Specifically, I'd like to add the park maintenance depot. I am going to just move it just to move it a little bit. But I think this structure ties really nicely into a high school complex, and we're actually going to add the extra garage upgrade as well. Mostly a visual thing. It's certainly not gonna do anything great for the job count, and I mean, creating public service buildings to increase job count is not a great idea in the first place, but we actually need this service provider. We're also gonna place a road maintenance depot, but with the architecture of this structure being a little more modern and slightly more industrial, I'm moving that up to Burfield, which we're going to expand with a few roads and the district tooling, just to make sure that it's actually a part of it. Yeah, there's just something odd about this look. I think the main issue is that the footprint of the high school complex is now just way too large. I mean, it rivals downtown in size. I think one way of fixing this would be to relocate the sports field to this lot here, so that it's technically a part of downtown and doesn't have the same connection to high school. And that would turn it into more of like a general all-purpose stadium than just a high school sports field. Let's just give it a go. Okay, so I think that was the right call to make. It kind of balances the visuals of the city much better. The stadium is now more so a part of downtown than the high school. And we've even got a bit of a mess here, which is always fun. Not fun to navigate, but fun to build and look at. We've just got a single issue, and that is that we need more water pumping capacities. But that's a quick fix. We're just gonna add one of these small, tiny water towers, maybe here by the park maintenance facility, and get that connected up. And as we've let the city just kind of cook for a little while, unemployment is now a complete non-issue. It's less than a single %, with more than 300 available jobs to spare. Which is perfect, because it means we can finally get all this Aussie terraced housing added to downtown. Adding some additional housing to downtown is hopefully also going to alleviate some of all these complaints of not having enough customers. And we see quite a few commercial establishments having this issue, and it's a bit of a vicious cycle because the companies or the shops will eventually go bankrupt. They're gonna sit empty until a new one moves in, and yeah, it's just a bad issue altogether. Now, mind you, we could zone in all this Australian themed terrace housing, just like we could have zoned everything you see in downtown currently, except for the signature and service buildings, because most of these are just level 1 assets. But I do like the extra control, especially because there's actually a slight difference in the perceived density of these terraced housing. I think this one looks a little more dense than this one, at least it looks a little taller. It's a very minor, very nerdy thing, but yeah, welcome to the channel. Yeah, let's just say I am super happy that I decided to go all in on these Aussie terraced housing. They look so nice, and the assets have so many props, bushes and surfaces that you barely have to do any detailing. It just kind of works right out the box. And having met Trist in real life a couple of weeks ago for the Stockholm content creator meetup, it just helps make me appreciate these assets so much more. And the overall look of downtown is just fantastic. I'm super excited on how this turned out. I hope you like it as well, but I'm very happy. Now, something I do enjoy about the game's simulation is the fact that when people move into a city, they don't seem to like immediately pick up a job somewhere. It seems like they just kind of have to settle for a little bit and then go on an actual job hunt. Because I have open positions readily available, but unemployment has been shooting up as people have been flocking into all this new housing. So I imagine it's gonna take a little while for this to settle, and then we'll see where the city is at. With these unemployment figures, I think we can add even more housing, so I think this space here next to the beach could feature a modern, sleek redevelopment. And I have just the signature asset to use for it, so we're just gonna add a very small alley here with some parking on one side. We'll go straight, we'll move up, and we'll make a connection here. That's perfect. Moving into signature buildings, we're gonna filter for residential, European themed, and find the Cedar Residence. So this is a full-scale complex, which is perfect because once again it kind of saves you the trouble of all the detailing. And I think we can just about squeeze this in here if we use better bulldozers, or to just remove a few of the fences so they don't clip into the surrounding streets here. Another great looking asset, which is really no surprise when you see the author is Groony, who I also got to hang out with in Stockholm, and who's been making amazing content for this franchise for years. But 112 households is really quite significant though, so it's gonna be interesting to see how this affects the current job market, but currently I think we have room to squeeze in even more residential. We'll use this Aussie flat also from PDX Mods to create like a small apartment complex right next to the high school. So we're gonna go 2 in one direction, then flip it 180 and align to the other side of the street here, or the other street, sorry. Something like this, and then probably we'll need just a little bit of parking. I really like the bright roof texture here, as it provides quite a bit of contrast to the rest of the city, and this has to be the definition of super simple detailing. One worry though is that they have 30 households each, so I think we're reaching the limit now and we'll have to look into expanding some additional employment options. So an easy way to add more jobs would simply be to increase the footprint of Burfield. I'm not too worried about increasing the scale of this combined office industrial area because much of the surrounding areas is going to be gobbled up by single family housing when we move on to some low density developments. With that said though, I can't help but feel that with so much available coastline, Willshire should probably have some port facilities. So I proudly present you all the port of Willshire. Here it is. What? You don't see it? Okay, I'm gonna help a little. I hope you're starting to see it now. The idea being that being sheltered behind the hilly peninsulas here is going to provide some protection from what could otherwise be rough seas, and besides that, I don't think we're gonna need a ton of space for this development. I don't expect this to be like a major shipping port. Maybe we'll just have a few barges, because I don't know if Willshire is facing the ocean or maybe just a great lake of some sort. All I know is that we'll be able to squeeze a couple of hundred industrial jobs out of this development, which is very much needed before we dive into all the suburban stuff. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna have a fun time trying to connect this up to the main highway. With the expected industrial traffic that will be spawning from the port of Willshire, I really don't need an at-grade crossing here, so we're gonna move underneath the highway bridge. This is going to require that we just raise it a little bit though. This is where Move It is going to come in clutch. We can now lay out this wide alley made with Road Builder, which is really just intended to better accommodate truck traffic. Some of the 18-wheelers are pretty sizable, and I'm sure some of the truck drivers are happy that I've got a custom, slightly wider road here they can utilize when trying to navigate the port area. The first connection is super simple, while the off-ramp is going to be a little more tricky and probably require a bit of tweaking with Move It. Not due to any of the curvatures here, I think they more than accommodate big trucks, but due to the slope. But we have plenty of adjustment opportunities here, so I think this first part is actually looking just fine. We'll just need to elevate a few of these nodes before we reach the actual underpass, because the clearance here is more than what we need. We'll of course make sure to disallow any of the turns that wouldn't make much sense, because if you want to get onto the actual bridge from the port, we'll just create the exact same configuration on this side. And with this being an on-ramp, we're going to adhere to some lane math. We'll start from about here and just get it connected. Once again, and disallowing weird left turns. Alright, so this is gonna sound weird, but I know my weaknesses and I'm having a real infrastructurist moment here. And an infrastructurist moment is the inability to look at a piece of infrastructure and just say, that's all right, that's enough, no more. I can't do that. I can't do that here because as I zoom out and pan the camera, you might be able to see something in the distance. Yeah, that's a rail line. I think the tiny port of Willshire needs rail connectivity. So here's the plan. We're going to utilize the same free clearance of this part of the bridge span, and hopefully we'll be able to move underneath this segment as well if we just upgrade it to an elevated one. Then we should be able to just kind of hog the entire coastline as well as this farming area and connect directly to this. I didn't plan for this, so it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I'm going to do my best to adhere to like realistic gradients as well, so 2, maybe 2.5%. I imagine this segment to be the most tricky bit, so as long as we can kind of just get this right, we should be in an okay position. So this would be a 2% decline, which should be fine. Then we're going to switch to the continuous tool. We'll make sure to have constant slope and ground on as options. Then we'll see how quickly we can get to ground level. That's very quickly. And then we're just gonna kind of creep our way through the coastline here. So actually this turned out to be a much easier project than initially anticipated. The map is relatively flat, the coastline is pretty forgiving, and I think we have just about enough clearance here underneath the bridge parts. As we develop the port of Willshire, we're going to start with a signature building. They usually just take up more space. I'd rather get that placed first. And I'm gonna use the cereal mill once again. I know I utilized it very recently in a different build, but it is just such a nice asset. It's a great focal point for any industrial area. So we're gonna place that on the very edge of this pier. I'm also just about going to find some space for this repurposed recycling center, and I think that's gonna be it for the larger scale signature buildings. We need some roads and a bit of rail. Now I've got this wide, slightly Japanese themed 2-lane road which I built with Word Builder, and I'm gonna see if that can be like the main road cutting through here. It has a very unique, distinctive look, and it has sewage and water connectivity already included, which is perfect. But obviously we're gonna need some sub-roads to really serve all these areas here. Let's just make sure that we get decent connectivity to downtown and the rest of town. We'll do a pretty straightforward connection to this segment and just bring that back a little bit because I'd like to have a one-laner allow for direct connection to the U-turn here, just in case you're trying to go in the opposite direction. We'll disable a left turn as well as a right turn and get rid of the traffic lights. We're going to add a 3-line rail yard track to the cereal mill, make sure we get a decent connection to the track moving underneath the overpass. And then we're gonna key off this segment of highway so that we can have an additional single track just run alongside it. We'll get the ramp connection in place and move on to the final bits of development. As I'm just not a fan of the vanilla all-in-one industrial zone, we're going to use a clean industrial zone of PDX mods. And as the name implies, it just kind of allows us to place these assets without having to manage insane chimneys and pollution, which is really nice for an area like this. We really need like a light manufacturing type zone, I think is the best way to put it. So let's just get some of these in place. I don't want to commit to a ton of detailing or anything, but industrial areas benefit so much from just a few basic surfaces and decals. this is completely unnecessary, but come on, a few agriculture car props next to the cereal mill, I'd be stupid not to. And we've got ourselves a nice, cozy, decently realistic, good-looking port. And while it's not big by any means, the 260 job offerings it provides is more than enough to completely eradicate unemployment and setting us up for the onset of suburban sprawl. As we start branching out to the suburbs, we're definitely going to need a bit more space. And ideally, I want the suburban perimeter to feature two distinctive designs and road layouts. The inner layer of suburbs, which is going to be built on either side of Burfield as well as the high school, is going to have a pretty tight grid layout, so the lot sizes are going to be fairly small and the houses are going to be pretty close together. The main idea here then is that as we then branch out to the outer layer of suburbs, we're gonna see the density drop even further as lot sizes get bigger, houses get bigger, and the road layouts get more swoopy and curvy, and lots of cul-de-sacs. Before doing any of that though, we need to continue this national road with a connection to the segment up here so that this can act as a arterial for all this new suburban sprawl. And we'll expand the road layout of Northville a little bit so that we don't have this direct transition from Australian themed terrace housing to a farm field. We're going to keep this dense bit of forest as sort of the divider between Northville's density and what lies beyond. In fact, I think we're going to give this a district of its own just so we can kind of name it as a park of some sort. Pinewood Peak is a little boring. Let's go with Squeeze Park. Yeah, a lot better. As Hawthorne Street is going to be one of the main arterials connecting this suburb directly to downtown, I think it reasonable to add just a few small commercial establishments alongside the street before we map out the actual suburb. Now we could easily zone this, but as I'd like to prioritize businesses that look like places you can grab a bite, a sandwich, something else to eat, I'm just gonna cherry pick what I want. The actual suburb we are going to try to zone, utilizing this French single-family housing theme by Grooney, which was added very recently to PDX Marts. Obviously I don't have the same control by zoning, but hopefully, since most of them are gonna spawn as level 1s and the lot sizes are pretty small as is, it's gonna look the part. Let's wait and see. We've got ourselves our first single family suburb, which I think I've named appropriately. 268 residents, which isn't too bad, could be worse in terms of density. Obviously the architectural style, or rather the roof texture, is quite the transition from the terrace housing. And you can actually recolor these extensively, so we could alterate them a little bit to make them look closer, but honestly I kinda like this transition. Now we just need 10,000 additional single family homes. First layer of basic suburbs now complete, and as expected, a massive visual change. And I think considering the necessity of kind of scaling things down in cities too, you could call this like a complete setup. I don't think that would be unreasonable. But I do think adding the second layer of swoopy, wealthy suburbs is going to add even more of a visual change than this first layer. And I think a downtown of this scale could use more suburban sprawl for a more realistic look overall. We also did a tiny bit of landscaping here, kept things super simple, but I think it works out. And most importantly, Willshire now has a McDonald's drive-through. And I'm a little surprised by just how Australian the city is starting to look, which may sound odd because obviously utilizing Australian themed terrace housing is going to give off an Australian vibe, but I'm surprised by how well it plays into the combination of this fringe-themed suburban housing, because the roof colors of much of the suburbs of a place like Sydney doesn't look all that different from these colors here. One thing we could do though is just make the tie-in between Northville and Britannia just a little more seamless. And what I mean by that is that we could remove a bunch of the terraced housing here and just replace these with a few of the fringe-themed suburban housing. That is going to make this transition a little less dramatic overall. We could do the same over here, where the transition is also a little sharp. Just kind of cleaning up a bit of this and then getting some 2x3s, I imagine, added in with this fringe-themed housing. I think that's just gonna tie the whole thing together a little better. It didn't change anything dramatically, but I do think it's a little more visually appeasing now. As I'm just gonna quickly change the surface from this weird sand thingy to some tiles at the high school, which I think was a very welcome change. It's time to dive into some of the swoopy or more wealthy suburbs with a thicker tree coverage and some larger lot sizes. We're gonna focus on some of these areas that don't have any farmland, because I'd like to just keep the farmland in place. It adds a really nice natural barrier. I'll also need to be manually plopping most of the houses here just to kind of achieve that wealthy look and make sure that there's plenty of difference between the suburb of West Willshire and whatever lies beyond. And here is an overview of all these new suburbs, starting with Pine Beach, named due to its location and the amount of pine trees here. 114 residents. We've got Fairview, 321. We've got Ashford Hill, 222, right next to Parker with 238. We've got Hart Isle, oh yes, great naming there, 166, and across the shores we've got Sunny Shores with 370 residents. One of the final additions we'll be adding here in Willshire is a single developer planned suburban community, much like we've got this apartment complex here near the high school. So for this one, we're gonna use a different development tactic altogether. We're gonna move up here and dezone a bit of this fringe stuff we've been placing. And then we're gonna get rid of the roads as well, because we'll need something entirely different. We're gonna use this narrow one-lane, one-way road with parking on one side, and make sure we have a free tile-wide zoning area for the buildings we'll be placing in here. Then we're just gonna add a simple straight segment. We'll add a curve so that we can move back and connect right back up. Then we're adding an additional segment to the immediate north of that and connecting that as well. To make this modern development really stand out, we're going to use houses from the waterfront or beachfront themes. So I'm just looking for something very basic that we can copy paste throughout much of this. Then we'll grab a small 2x2, which we're gonna map out for this small block here. We'll add some super simple pathways in here, one running between the buildings. And we're gonna make sure that they have the same color scheme throughout this entire development. So I guess it's going to be this one. A few palm trees added in, and that's pretty much gonna be a wrap. With these builds being so quick to make and feeling super realistic, I'm just gonna add a quick one here next to Burfield as well. And you can keep things super simple, like just grab the same cookie cutter home and just paste that throughout an area and streamline the color scheme, and it's pretty much gonna look like one of these uniform single developer additions. This is sort of an infill, I guess, if we imagine nothing used to sit here before. You can do these types of development with higher densities as well, of course, including row houses, but I find that depending on how modern you want things to look, it's very dependent on the exact assets you choose. So I think this row house from the US Southwest pack, which looks like it's been renovated a lot, is definitely gonna work. We're going to be wrapping up with a small detailing session, mainly centered around downtown. And I don't want to do anything fancy here. I don't want downtown to feel much more detailed than the rest of the city. So some simple surface work, getting a bit of landscaping done here in the central corridor, maybe a few pathways to the beach and a parking lot or two, and that's pretty much gonna be it. And then afterwards I'll be sharing my final thoughts, things I would improve if I was to continue the city, which might be relevant if you're looking to grab the save game from my Patreon and continue Willshire on your own. The yellow surface just adds a ton of contrast, so yeah, I kind of just had to use it, and maybe imagine that this renovation project also kind of overhauled much of the stadium ground, kind of tying that all together. I think it looks really nice, a very striking visual look as you move down Main Street north and south here. And as mentioned, a bit of additional parking and some quick paths to the local beach. Overall, Willshire has been a super fun, very challenging build, and I think it's a decent showcase that you don't need a ton of detailing to make things look nice. You don't need to spend, weeks getting a small town established. And I also think it's a decent showcase of the ability to mix many different architectural styles. I don't think I would initially have suggested mixing French suburban housing with a slightly North American downtown with Australian terrace housing, but here we are and I think it all works. For those of you looking to grab the Willshire save off of Patreon and continue this build, I am going to leave you with a slightly more stable financial situation, because I think a small tax bump across all types of zonage, as well as maybe a few service fees for electricity and water supply, and we should be good to go. Maybe even cutting the budgets for park maintenance, maybe that's not as important. And what about road maintenance? We've got that massive road maintenance depot without having a massive city. For recommendations for the near future of Willshire, I recommend you look into some job creation. I think the unemployment rate is going to settle at around 20% if you let the simulation run for a bit, and while you can still turn a profit with that, obviously, it's just not ideal. If you're up for a fun infrastructure challenge, you might be able to squeeze in a small passenger train station. I mean, there's a lot of empty space here, so recalibrating some of this infrastructure and then bringing in the train line from up here might just work. But other than that, it's just your imagination being the limiting factor. This map is huge and it's just a wonderful one. There's plenty of low-level infrastructure in place. There's already some additional tiles unlocked, and as an added bonus, it's free to unlock buildable tiles on this map. Which you may like or not like, but it certainly makes expansion easy. It's also cool how the tiles are all custom instead of just being the regular squares. There's a fun one up here as well with what even looks like a port preparation of some sort. So yeah, lots of opportunities. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, all the wonderful support and feedback. I really do appreciate it. And if you don't want to miss out on similar content in the near future, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Goodbye.